தம்பி நீ கொஞ்சம் முன்னால வந்தா எல்லாம் ஒன்றா உட்கார மாதிரி போல. ஆ எந்திரி. இந்த செகண்ட் ரோ ஃபுல் பண்ணு போ. ஏன் செகண்ட் ரோ ஃபுல் பண்ணு.
Welcome to this series on talks on blockchain. I've actually prepared 3 presentations, hoping for 3 sessions, but you needn't worry, I won't be taking all 3 sessions, and they won't be for an hour as well. The duration is not really fixed, depending on how interactive you are, we'll probably shorten or lengthen it as per your convenience. So I arranged it such that the first presentation, which is this on Bitcoin, will be at the very basic level. You need not have any background or cryptography to understand this. And then the next level, second talk in the afternoon would be at intermediate level, which would expect some background knowledge on cryptography. And finally, the last talk would be at research level. I'll introduce you to 3 research problems which I worked on as part of my research. So we start with this first. Before I begin, may I please know if anyone here is already familiar with blockchain or Bitcoin? How it works? Yes, we have a technical note. Anyone else? Okay, so the majority here does not have an idea on blockchain and Bitcoin, so we'll go very slowly with this first topic. Okay. So Bitcoin, as you can see here, is a currency that is built on blockchain. So what we are doing in this first session is we are trying to eat a fruit without looking too much at the tree. We'll study the tree later on in the next session and the roots in the third session. Right now we're just going to eat the fruit to see how sweet it is. Okay. While you can have you can get an idea of the working of blockchain without too much knowledge of cryptography. A little bit of it is still necessary. Okay, so before I start the presentation, there are 4 things which I'll slightly touch upon, and then we'll go to the presentation. So the first thing is, you are all familiar with mathematical logic. First order logic. Once again, we won't go into a greater depth in any of these topics. It's just a little bit, as much as is necessary to understand my rendering of this presentation. Okay? So the first thing we look at logic is implication and the contrapositive. Okay? So we denote this implication by this symbol P implies Q, where P and Q are statements. Okay? Like you have in maths something of the sort of x is equal to 3, where x is a variable and 3 is a constant. Here P and Q will be statements. Okay? For instance, P could be a statement, it rains. And Q could be the statement, the ground is wet. Okay. We denote this as an implication. If it rains, the ground will be wet. Okay. Now the question is, if I say the ground is wet, what can you say from this? I'm telling you, if it rains, the ground will be wet. Now I'm telling you, the ground is wet. So can I conclude that it rained? Yes? Okay. Actually, this is wrong. It cannot be, it is not necessarily true. The ground will be wet if it rains. The ground will also be wet if someone used a bucket to pour water out. The ground will also be wet if someone used a hose to irrigate it. There are other causes for the ground to be wet, one of which is raining, and that is what I told you about. So you cannot conclude that if the ground is wet, that it rained. The only thing you can conclude from here, which is called the contrapositive, is not Q implies not P. In English, if the ground is not wet, then it did not rain. From the statement, if it rains, the ground is wet, the only logical conclusion that you can draw is, if the ground is not wet, then it did not rain. Because if it rained, the ground would have definitely been wet. Since it did not rain, it is definitely not wet, it definitely did not rain. That is the only valid conclusion. Okay, that is an example. What the message here is, from the statement P implies Q, the only conclusion you can draw is the negation of this implies the negation of this. Okay, so that is what I wanted to drive in logic. Is this clear, or if this is clear, we could go to the next one. Okay. So the next thing is a little bit on probability. Probability, it studies how likely an event is to occur. Okay. So for instance, you have a coin and you toss it. The possible outcomes are head and tail. The probability of head is half, the probability of getting tail is half. These are equally likely events. Similarly, you have dice. The possible outcomes are 1 to 6, each of which has a probability of 1 over 6. They are all equally likely events. Okay. Now you can define an event such that the probability is not always equal. For instance, let's say you have a pack of cards and you define an event such that it is a number. I randomly pick a card from a pack of cards. What is the probability that it is a number? Can anyone tell me what it is? 1 by?
52.
So that is the probability for one particular number. Like if I say 3 of dice or 5 of hearts, probability for that is 1 over 52. I am saying any number. Could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of any suit. So how do you find it? You have 2 to 9. So that is how much? 8 cards in each suit. You have 4 suits. So it is 32. So it will be, the probability of getting a number is 32 over 52. And the probability of getting something that is not a number will be 20 over 52. Okay. So if you define an event as getting a number, the probability is this. The probability of this event not occurring is 20 over 52. So you can see the contrast here. If we define an event as getting head and the other event as getting tail, the probabilities are equal. You can also define the probabilities, the events like this, such that their probabilities are unequal. Okay. Now, when we come across these things, the way that probability is distributed, there are things called distributions which study them. Okay. Say for instance, I have 100 chocolates and I call one from the audience and I ask it to distribute it to everyone, however they wish. So this person might give 10 chocolates to that person, 2 chocolates to that person, none to this person, 3 to this person, and so on. So that is one distribution. You have something, you are distributing it in some fashion. Now I give those 100 chocolates to someone else and ask them to distribute, they might follow some other distribution. Similarly, the total probability in anything is 1. You add these 2, you get 1. You add these 6, you get 1. You add these 2, you get 1. How are you going to distribute this total probability of 1 among all the possible events? Each of that is called a distribution. Okay. So let's say this person was called X. The distribution of X is that this person gets 3, that person gets 4, and so on. The distribution of Y is such that this person gets 10, that person gets 20, and so on. So similarly, there are some distributions for continuous cases. There are some distributions for discrete cases. For instance, these ones. These are all discrete. You can have 1 head or 2 head and so on. You can't have 1.5 heads, 1.67 heads. Those things are not possible in the discrete cases. Okay. Now in the discrete case also, there are many kinds of distributions, of which what we are concerned today is the Poisson distribution. Okay. So this is natural. There are some events in nature which follow the Poisson distribution. And that tends to happen when the number of times you repeat an experiment tends to infinity. Okay. Let me compare with binomial distribution so that you understand. Let's say you have 10 coins. You have 10 coins, you flip all 10 coins, and you're going to study how many heads you get or how many tails you get. Okay. So the number of times you're repeating this experiment is 10 times. You're going to study the number of times you get a head. So you define an event as getting a head. What is the probability of getting a head? It is 1 by 2 or 0.5. And what is the probability of the opposite happening, or the probability of a failure? That is also 1 by half. Both are almost equal to 0.5. Okay. Now, Poisson distribution studies things where the number of times the experiment is repeated is very high, like 1,000 or million and so on, which is much bigger than just a few tens or hundreds. And the probability of success is very less. For instance, you have a very good book, very good author, very good publisher. What is the probability of finding errors in that book? That follows Poisson distribution. A very large book with few thousand pages, and the probability of finding an error in a book written by a very good author, published by a very good publisher, is very less. So those kind of things will follow the Poisson distribution. Okay. And the formula for finding the probability of a random variable x, which follows the Poisson distribution, we denote it with this expression, and we read it as probability that the random variable x takes a certain value x is e power minus lambda power x by x factorial, where lambda is called the mean or the parameter. Okay. Don't worry if you don't understand too much, doesn't matter. I'm just giving you some basics to feel on. Okay. So this is a formula. It has a negative exponent, which means when the number of terms increases, the probability is going to get smaller. Okay. That is the only thing which I want you to understand. This is a distribution where the probability is going to get smaller and smaller when the number of experiment or any value x takes. When the mean is high, the probability is going to become smaller and smaller, and that is the one which Bitcoin also follows. Okay. All right. Just two more. Now we move to cryptography and we see what hashing is. Okay. So mathematically, hashing is described as a function that maps a string of 0 and 1 of any length to a string of zeros and 1 of a predetermined fixed length n. Okay. So what does it mean? In simpler terms, in colloquial terms, this is some function. You give it an input n, which can be of any length. Okay. Your message can be as small as 0011, or it can be several millions of bits. Whatever your input is, your output will always be of fixed length. For instance, in this case, we have 8-bit output. Likewise, you can define. You can have 8-bit, 16-bit. You can predefine what you want, and whatever the input is, whether it is just 1 bit or 2 bit or very big, the output will always be equal to the same bits. Okay. One particular algorithm called SHA-256 gives you an output of 256 bits, which is what it's called, secure hashing algorithm 256. Okay. So one of the properties is whatever input you give, the output is always of fixed length. The other property is going this way is very hard. By which I mean, if I give the input, the function can compute the output. But if I give you this output and I ask you, what was the input that produced this as the output, it is not easy to find. Finding the inverse is very hard. How hard it is? You have to take all the possible inputs and compute the hash for them to see if it works. Okay? And the rub on that is that we say that there is no rule on the length of the input. So the input can be 1 bit long, 2 bit long, 3 bit long, and so on. So you need to take all of the possible binary inputs, hash it one by one to see whether the output is equal to this. Okay, so which means you're going to have to try millions of possibilities before you hit at least one input which gives you this as the output. Okay, I'm not sure if you're able to appreciate how hard the reverse is. Given an input, you can immediately find the output, but given an output, it is almost impossible to find the input because there is no straightforward way. The only way to go is take all the possible inputs, try one by one, and if you get an output, then you hit at the right answer, which is going to take a long time because we don't have any clue about what the input was or what even the length of the input is. Okay. So this is one of the properties which will make Bitcoin secure. That some security will be built on this principle that it is not possible to go in the reverse direction. Okay. So that's about hashing. The last thing is public key cryptography. Is this familiar to anyone? Public key cryptography or asymmetric key cryptography? Yes? Okay. So what happens here is asymmetric key cryptography, I believe you'll be familiar. Even if not, it's easy to imagine. You have a message M which you want to send to someone else. Encrypt and send to someone else. So what you do is you use some algorithm and you use a key, a secret key which you use to encrypt this message. So this is a function which encrypts. It gives you a ciphertext as the output. And what does the receiver do? He too should have the same key. Okay. So he uses the same key to decrypt your ciphertext to retrieve the message. Okay. In physical world, you can think it of a lock. So you use a key to lock it, and someone else uses the same key to unlock it. A lock has multiple copies of just the same key. You cannot use a different lock to open it after someone has locked it. Okay, you can have multiple copies of the same key and give it to whoever you wish. You lock it and someone else who has the same key can open it. Okay. But there is a problem here which we will see in the second session, which necessitates what is called asymmetric key cryptography. Sharing this key is difficult. I'll touch upon this in the second session, not now. Because of which, there is the need for another cryptographic system where one key is used for encryption and a different key is used for decryption. You cannot use the same key for both encrypting and decrypting. One key can only lock, the other key can only open. This key cannot lock and that key cannot open. So, to understand a physical example of this, you should be familiar with letterboxes, I believe. In some addresses, you might see post box number 47 of this sort. So, what happens in the post office? You have several boxes, and this is box number 47, which is designated for you. So what happens whenever someone wants to post a letter to you, they put the letter into this box, but they cannot take it outside. Only you have the key to open it and take the letters from inside. Okay? Now, just for name's sake, let us say it has some screen on front of it with a key. The key is already attached to it. You can't take the key out of it, the key is attached to it. So anyone who wants to drop a letter to you opens the screen with the key which is attached there and puts the letter inside and closes it. Now only you have the key to open this box. So you open the box and take the letter out of it. Okay? So anyone can put the letter inside. That is like encrypting. There is a key which is attached to the screen. Anyone can open the screen using the key and put your letter inside. But only you have the key to the box, and so only you can open and take the letter out of the box. Okay? So this key which is attached to it is called the public key. That is available to everyone. That is visible to everyone, accessible to everyone. Anyone who wants to send the letter will have access to this. But only you have the private key or the secret key which can open the box. Okay? Right. So if that is clear, then we can proceed. So as I said, Bitcoin is a currency. We know different kinds of currencies. We'll actually look at them, have a quick look at them. Bitcoin is one of the currencies which is built on a blockchain. And there are many such currencies which are built on a blockchain like Ripple coins, Ether, and so on. They are all collectively called as cryptocurrencies. Okay. The word cryptocurrency means some system of currency which is built on blockchain. Now we'll start from the very beginning to understand what things necessitated a cryptocurrency and why things came this far. Okay. So we'll start at the very beginning. In the earliest stages of the history of mankind, the system of bartering for goods was in vogue. Okay. What does bartering mean? There was no money at the time, and if you want to buy something, you want apples, you need to find someone who is willing to sell apples in exchange for something which you are willing to sell. So I have a lot of bananas and I want apples. You have a lot of apples and you want bananas. So we come to an understanding. I'll give you some bananas, you give me apples, and we are happy. That is common across all the cultures in all the continents. What were the problems in this? At times, it was difficult to find someone who had common wants. So I have apples and I want bananas. You have bananas, but you want oranges. So you're not willing to take the apples which I'm willing to sell, and I'm not willing to take the bananas which you are willing to offer. Okay? So there are difficulties like this. And then there was no common measure. I might say 1 apple is equal to 3 bananas. You might say 1 apple is equal to 4 bananas. So we didn't have a common reference standard for which against which we can perform our transactions. Which is why money or currency itself was invented. Okay? So the first kind of currency that came into existence was called commodity currency. And the commodity currency has its worth in itself. They were gold and silver coins and precious stones. So these commodity currency instances, they have their worth in itself. 20-gram gold coin is worth what 20 grams of gold is worth. A 50-gram silver coin is worth what 50 grams of silver is worth. And typically these were issued by the sovereigns of the state, the reigning monarchs, who imprinted some kind of seal on them to ascertain that it actually came from them. In this picture you can see coins from the Roman, the Byzantine, the Indian and the Persian empires. And some seals of the reigning monarchs who actually issued these coins. The problem with commodity currency was that, for instance, when you're using gold coins, the supply of gold itself was limited. We don't have unlimited access to gold. There is only limited amount of gold which is buried in the earth. And you need to extract the gold from the mines, you need to purify it, which itself was an expensive process. Burying, digging and mining, extracting, purifying the gold itself was a very expensive process. And when you're minting coins, you tend to waste some of the metal, which you have even in these modern day jewelers. They charge you for wastages, so they charge you extra for wastage. And in ancient days, if you're minting gold coins and wasting, then you're wasting a lot. If you're wasting gold, you're wasting a lot. So these problems necessitated a new kind of currency where these problems can be overcome. The supply of gold is limited, so you want to build a system of currency on something which is not limited. Wasting gold means you're wasting a lot, so you want to build a currency on something which you can afford to waste, something that is not too expensive. And purifying gold also is very expensive, so you want to build a currency on something where you need not spend too much money on purification. So these factors, they necessitate the next kind of currency, which is called fiat currency. The word fiat comes from the Latin fiat, which means let it be, which is the equivalent of the Viyangol in Tamil, which says Irupadaga. Okay? So what it means is a fiat currency does not have its worth in itself. It is worth something only because someone else says it is worth this thing. So in this picture you are seeing the, anyone recognize this? What coins are these? Sorry? These are Indians. So these are the infamous copper coins that were issued by the King Muhammad bin Tughlaq when he ran out of gold in his country, in his kingdom. He minted these copper coins and gave to people and said, you consider this to be equal to gold and use it for your transactions. Later on, when I annex the neighboring kingdoms and I appropriate their gold, I will exchange these copper coins for gold. It was a good idea, which is the only thing you could do when you don't have enough gold in your country. But unfortunately, he did not take the issue of security seriously. He did not have any seal on it. He just had some inscriptions saying this coin is worth so much in gold, and it was not difficult to replicate these inscriptions. Okay. Here you are seeing a coin that has been magnified some 100 times. Those small coins where you cannot distinguish, it was not foolproof. So everyone in the country, they started minting their own copper coins. So copper was abundant. Even poor people can mint. It didn't need any complicated purification process. Poor people can do it. And just some inscription on that also was not too difficult to replicate. So in a few days, the whole country was filled with lots of fake copper coins. Now this problem is overcome in today's fiat currency, which is paper money, through the use of such security features like a special kind of paper. You see, different countries, they have different material on which they print their currency. So the special kind of material they use, the shapes, the sizes, the colors, serial numbers, bleed lines, watermarks, holograms and so on. There are so many security features which prevent the earlier mishap that happened to Muhammad bin Tughlaq. But still it is only fiat currency. What do we mean by fiat currency? It is worth something only if someone says it is worth something. The moment the Prime Minister of India decides to demonetize a 500 rupee note, it is not worth anything anymore. Okay? It is just a mere scrap of color paper. So it is just a paper. It has some worth because an authority says it is worth something. That is a fiat currency. Until so far, currency has been something physical. In the commodity currency and in the fiat currency, it was a physical quantity. It has some mass, it occupies some volume, and if I want to steal some money which you have, I need to literally break into your safe and physically move these coins or these currency notes from one place to my place. Only then you have lost the money and I have gained the money. With the next state in currency, it is for a complete change. Okay? Now all of us are already accepting this digital currency. We are using, yeah, there are everything. Okay. So why did this come into being? We found it inconvenient to carry large amounts of cash. We thought it was not safe, and it was inconvenient. There was always this perennial problem of tendering exact fare at every place. All of that is overcome by digital currency. We use all these cards, ATM cards, debit cards, prepaid cards, credit cards, internet banking. So many apps are coming every day, and then merchants like Amazon, they come up with their own wallets and so on. So in this case, note that there is a marked difference from the previous kind of currency. Nothing is physical here. Okay, the money, you say I have 10,000 rupees. You don't have anything physically. It is just a record in the database of the bank. Okay, so database, imagine it as something like an Excel sheet. In the Excel sheet, you have this person has 10,000 rupees. That is the only thing which asserts that you have so much money. If I go and change the Excel sheet, then you lose money. Okay? I don't need to break into your house, I don't need to break into your safe or do anything. Everything is digital in a record. Okay? So what is the problem with digital currency? Every transaction that you do in digital currency goes through a third party, which is the bank. Okay? And the problem with digital currency is that it opens the door to a problem called double spending. Okay? So imagine I order something from Amazon, I pay them the money and I get my order back. Now this transaction did not go from me directly to the money did not go from me directly from me to Amazon. It went through the bank who transferred it to Amazon. Now after I receive my parcel in my hand, if I have an unethical friend in the bank, I can ask him to reverse this transaction. And he can do it because it is just a backspace and typing some other number on an Excel sheet. Okay? What happens if he does that? Amazon suffers a loss, I get my money back, which I can spend on something else. Yeah, it is centralized. And what is the effect of that? If the centralized person is not ethical, if he is liable to accept bribes, then I can use him to manipulate my account and Amazon's account. So he reduces the money from Amazon's account and credits the money to my account. Amazon suffers a loss, I get my money back, which I can spend on something else. I have spent the same money for two different things, and that is called double spending. Spending the same money multiple times is called double spending. Okay? Now, so third party implies double spending. Can you use the basic we saw in the implication and tell me what I can conclude from here? What should I do if I want to eliminate double spending? We saw the contrapositive. P implies Q, so not Q implies not P. So if I have a third party, it's a possibility of double spending. So if I do not want double spending, what should I do? Eliminate the third party. Okay? If there is no third party, only I transact directly with Amazon, then there is no possibility of double spending. I cannot steal Amazon's money, and so we are good. But the problem of eliminating a third party is that it opens the door to a probability of fraud, of forgery. So imagine the setting where it was only me and Amazon. I send the money to Amazon, and now Amazon denies that I paid them. Since it did not go through anyone, since there is no witness of this transaction, I don't have any proof to substantiate my claim that I actually paid Amazon. I paid, but Amazon denies, and I don't have any proof. So Amazon defrauds me. Okay? Now, how do you overcome this? There is no third party. It implies the possibility of a fraud. So if I do not want fraud to happen, what should I have? Yeah, we'll come to that. From this statement, you take the contrapositive of this, you get not of not I'm just applying this rule over here. Okay? Not fraud should give me not of third party, which simply means the third party. Okay? So if I want to eliminate the possibility of fraud, I need to have a third party who will be my witness that I actually transfer the money to them. Okay? And now you can see that we are in a fix. Okay? Because combine these two. If I eliminate the probability of double spending by removing a third party, that causes the problem of fraud. Okay? So if I eliminate one problem by removing a third party, the effect of that is that, the effect of removing a third party is that I open the door to the possibility of a fraud. But if I eliminate the possibility of fraud by having a third party, what happens if I have a third party? The problem is double spending. Okay? So if I eliminate one of these two problems, it automatically causes the other problem. Okay? You can either have a third party or not have a third party. If you have a third party, then you have the probability of double spending. If you eliminate the third party, you are stuck up with the possibility of fraud. Whereas what we want is something that will eliminate double spending and at the same time eliminate the probability of a fraud. Okay? So the answer to this is Bitcoin. Okay? Is there any contradiction here? Because I just said that I said that you can either have a third party or not have a third party. There are only two choices. You either have a third party or not have a third party. And both of those have negative consequences. And eliminating one automatically causes the other. And now we are talking about eliminating both the possibilities simultaneously. We are not contradicting ourselves because if you take a closer look, the problem here is not about the presence or the absence of third party. It is only about the presence or absence of one of the aspects of a third party. Here I said that the third party causes double spending. It is not actually the third party, but it is power to change. It is this power that the third party has to change a transaction after it has occurred that is the cause of double spending. So if you do something to take away the change, the power to change, then the presence of third party is harmless. Whether he is there or not doesn't make any difference. Similarly here, it is not so much the lack of a third party that causes the problem of fraud. It is actually the lack of a proof. It is the lack of a proof that opens the door to the possibility of a fraud. So if you can do something to include a proof, an undeniable proof, an immutable proof, then we have a solution. Okay? So if we have a system of currency in which it is impossible to change and it offers an undeniable proof of a transaction that occurred, then we are good. Which is exactly what Bitcoin does. Okay? So in a nutshell, Bitcoin is a system of currency in which it is impossible to change a transaction after it has occurred and which offers undeniable proof of the transaction that occurred. Okay? So that is how Bitcoin overcomes these two difficulties. So in the next few slides we will see how the Bitcoin works and how that architecture addresses these two issues. Okay? So those diagrams are from a white paper by a person called Satoshi Nakamoto. He's a mysterious person. No one knows who he actually is. He published a paper in 2008 or 9, I think 8. So in which he gives certain things in high-level mathematics and diagrams. We can simplify this. So let's try to understand how Bitcoin works. So we said that Bitcoin is built on a blockchain which as the name implies is a chain of blocks. You have a chain of blocks which record all the transactions that occur. And let's say there is some person X who wants to send some bitcoins to person Y. Okay. So when he does that, he sends this request to a pool of people called the miners. I'll use this to denote all the nodes. So a group of people who are working together. He sends the request here. The request will be signed by his private key. So anyone, we said the public key is accessible to anyone, everyone. Everyone could verify that this request is actually from X. He sends a request here, and at the same time, there are several requests that are coming from all over the world to this network, saying they want to send so much money to some other person. Currently, after 10 minutes, so this time can vary, currently it's 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, all of these transactions are verified. They are added in a new block to this blockchain, and this is complete, meaning X sends the money to Y. So this is the highest level of working of Bitcoin. Now let's descend one step deeper to understand how this actually works. Okay. So we said that every 10 minutes, all of these transactions are verified. Okay. How are these transactions verified? In popular parlance, it is styled by solving cryptographic puzzles. So, what are these puzzles? They are solving hashes or computing hashes. So, I'm zooming into these blocks here. Okay. So, what happens is each block, at the beginning, it has the hash of the previous block. Okay. So we said that hash, it can take any input and it produces a fixed output. So it computes the hash of the previous block. And then, amongst other data, it has all the transactions that are going to be contained in this block. So during these last 10 minutes, there were so many transactions that came to this network. Those are all contained in this. And then there is a nonce. A nonce is a random number. A random number which is used to generate an acceptable hash. Okay. So now if you hash this, you get something like 1010, let's say. Something of 256 bits. Now there is a condition that the first 4 digits should be 0. An acceptable hash should have 0 in the first 4 as the first 4 bits. So if this is the hash we get, that is not acceptable. So what this miner will do is he'll try with a different nonce. Nonce is just a random number. You try with 5, if it doesn't work, then you try with 7, you try with 8, and so on. Okay. We keep trying with different numbers until the hash of this whole thing is such that at least the first 4 digits are 0. Once it happens, this node publishes it to there is only so much gold that is left. Once all the gold has been dug out and is being made into ornaments, if you want gold, what do? You go and ask someone who is willing to sell, probably for some higher price.
You told about the chain sequence in input side.
Yes.
Suppose we are changing one bit, totally changes are there now.
Lot of
Why can't we go for encryption?
The purpose of encryption is different now. Encryption, decryption, purpose to attain confidentiality. This hashing is to detect changes for integrity. If I want to tell you something in secret, I will go for encryption. Now, if I'm getting something from you, I want to check whether it's genuine or not. whether it is correct or not, then I'll go to hashing. Any other questions?
Already Bitcoin range is around 80 lakhs.
Yes, but a couple of days ago it was 83.
So is it advisable to invest in Bitcoin further?
I would suggest you talk to your financial advisors. I am not a financial expert, I am just a humble blockchain researcher. My personal opinion is I would say don't go for Bitcoin. See, Bitcoin is a currency that is built on blockchain. I'm working on blockchain. Whether Bitcoin is advisable is left to private interpretation. My opinion is I wouldn't go for it. Because we'll see in the next presentation, it is very volatile. Just because it's 84 lakhs now doesn't mean that 2 years down the lane it will still be at that level. Which is why some countries are not encouraging it. They do not want to base their finances on a system of currency which is so volatile, unpredictable. But then again, there are also many people who are investing in Bitcoin and they are gaining. So whether you're willing to take risk, how much you're willing to risk, how long you're willing to risk it, it's a private choice. Anything else? Right, so then I think we can conclude. So as I said, I have two more presentations. One will be like a technical introduction to Bitcoin, which will be a bit more technical than this. And the last one will be at research level, some of the problems that we are working on in Bitcoin. If I get an idea of what things you people will be interested in, I could time it appropriately. I didn't come with a fixed time. I was thinking of, depending on how interactive or how beneficial it will be to you, we could lengthen or shorten things as you please. Is there anyone here who's interested in researching into blockchain and things? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so perhaps we could try to be fast with the second presentation and go on to the third, if you're interested, or if you'd like to. I guess we'll play it by the ear, depending on how you want. So I think we can conclude now. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Gracias.